touch on a few things which are, one or two you're not going to be too happy about. My apologies, F5 on the wrong screen. I was trying to press F5 on the PowerPoint presentation. Okay. Back on, and the slide should be showing now. Okay. Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to week 3. Yes, week 3 already. We're continuing with classes. We have some announcements, some things to discuss, some things you're not going to be too happy about. But unfortunately, that's going to come into play. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the announcements. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you may have heard this term last semester at the beginning of the semester, your practical component mark. Okay, last semester it was not considered when entrance for exam. When it comes to this semester, it's being reinstated. So regardless of the semester, how things are done, if your practical component mark is below 50%, you don't write the exam. So this is a very important notice. That's why it's in the slides. And we're also going to put it onto Eve and to Discord so everyone can see it. But I'm going to emphasize this now. We'll come to the practical in a few seconds. I need to emphasize the PCM, ladies and gentlemen. So the PCM is a combination of your weekly practicals and semester assessment 2. The formula is on your learning guide, page 18, what the ratio is between your practicals and the semester assessment 2. Go have a look at that so you can understand that. Okay, but please understand, if your practical component mark is below 50%, you will not write the exam for Informatics 1B. Over. No matter what your semester mark is, if your practical component mark is below 50%, you do not write the exam. So please take notice of that. That is a very important announcement. This was discussed last week in a departmental meeting, and we're reinstating it. Okay, it was suspended for last semester to allow students to adjust to online lecturing and online practicals. This semester you should have adjusted and caught up, so understand what's going on. So it's being reinstated. This is a standard policy within the academy, and it's been here for a couple of years. So it's not something new, but you guys are first year, so this will probably be the first time you're hearing about it and seeing it. So again, if your PCM is below 50%, you do not write the exam. Next thing, this irritated myself and a lot of the assistants. Students not submitting designs. I know I'm probably talking to the students that, not submitting practicals. Okay. A lot of students are not submitting practicals. I'm most likely talking to the students that did submit practicals. So I'm not saying anything to you. I'm talking to the students that I'm hopefully going to be listening to the recording. You need to submit your weekly practicals, ladies and gentlemen. We're getting a large number of students not submitting anything. And then designs. If you do not submit a complete design, you will not be marked. End of story. This is a rule for Informatics 1A. This is a rule for Informatics 1B. You must submit a complete design with all 8 sections. Even with Practical 2, even if the section was left blank in the case of maybe variables, because you didn't have a global variable, you still needed to submit the section saying variables. But you need to submit a complete design. End of story. No ifs and buts. Okay. Practical 2 is the only one you will not have variables. From next week on, you will have variables. Prac 3, you have variables. One thing some students have asked for additional attempts on practicals, ladies and gentlemen, we're not going to be allowing additional attempts on practicals because the solutions are being given on a Saturday tutorial. Mr. Singh is working through the weekly practical in his tutorial. So I cannot give you an additional opportunity to do a practical when the solution is being released. So please do not ask for that. In terms of practicals not being marked and practicals that need to be remarked because you think it is unfair, here's the basic outline. You have 14 days, 2 weeks from the due date of a practical to query a practical. So for each practical you'll have, each practical will be marked within 5 days. So some assistants cannot be online on a Friday. They cannot mark on a Friday afternoon, or they cannot mark during the day due to data restrictions. Like some of you, they can't attend lectures, and some of you, they can't attend practical sessions due to data restrictions. Some of the assistants are in the same boat. They're also students. So if the assistants are not online on a Friday, or they're not marking on a Friday, they will mark within 5 days. So by Wednesday, your practical should be marked if you've complied and uploaded the design and the code, the correct design and the correct code. But you have 2 weeks to query a practical. So 14 days to query the practical. After that, we consider the practical finalized, and that is your final mark. So please, if something is wrong with the practical, you feel you've been unfairly marked, you're welcome to query it within 2 weeks. And the email must be done properly, and email to both Mr. van der Westhuizen and myself, else we won't consider it, because we both need to be informed about it. Okay, and we'll then handle the matter. So that's that first set of announcements. Guidelines for feedback, especially on a Friday afternoon. We're addressing the situation that happened last week Friday with students complaining about feedback and issues, so we're addressing everything. If you want to get feedback, these are the conditions that need to be, especially live online feedback. Firstly, you need to submit a practical that to be marked. So you must submit something. Second, you must be online and the assistant must be online. Again, some assistants are not online due to data restrictions, or they partially online. So bear in mind, they also are students and they also have the same problems with data. So we are handling the situation as best as we can. So if you want feedback and you're not online, you can also request feedback by letting us know. Okay, so if you want feedback, if you would like feedback and you can't be online, we will make arrangements for you, but we need to know. You need to also inform us that you want feedback 24 hours before the deadline of the practical, so we know ahead of time to tell the assistant that we need feedback for your respective practical. So if you can't be online and you, for a valid reason, which is data restrictions, etc., load shedding, whatever, and you want, okay, load shedding you can't really predict, and you want feedback, let us know so we can tell the assistant when marking, do feedback, so they know they must give you additional feedback or additional sections, and then we will email it to you, or we'll find a way to get it to you. If the assistant is not online, a notification will be posted in the text channel, and feedback will be posted with, will be given by the lecturers or forwarded to you within 7 days. Okay, so this to address getting feedback to you for marked practicals. But ladies and gentlemen, if you are not online, you'll still be marked. But if you're not online, the assistants, and if the assistants don't know you want feedback, they're not going to give you feedback. Okay, it's difficult for them to know, okay, I must just randomly give feedback. Some of the assistants, and we're encouraging the assistants to provide general feedback on the text channels for your group, but that's not specific feedback to you. So keep that in mind. That's just general feedback. That's it for the announcements. Have I missed anything, Mr. van der Westhuizen? Have I got anything to add that I need to add? Also, please keep in mind, feedback is a maximum of 12 minutes per student, as we don't know which students are online. Okay, we're also going to give guidelines to the assistants on how to mark and how to handle online, because as things are, we're just adjusting things. Have I missed anything, Mr. van der Westhuizen? No, okay. Okay, Elation, I hope you understand this. And Again, I need to emphasize this PCM because some of you are going to come to me end of the semester, Mr. Van der Vestays, at the end of the semester, and complain that you did not know about, oh no, I didn't know about the PCM. Again, this will be on the notice board, this will be on everywhere, but if your practical component mark is below 50%, you cannot write the final exam for Informatics 1B. Your practical component mark is outlined in the learning guide already. It's been there since the beginning of the semester. How the marks are calculated is outlined in the learning guide. It is based on your weekly practical assignments plus your semester test too. Now, one thing I can say from feedback from the assistants is a lot of students are not taking the practical seriously, especially the designs. If you're giving us a half-baked design, ladies and gentlemen, is a problem. You need to do your designs properly. We expect proper work from you. You have a week to do the practical. It's not like you have an hour or so, you have a full week to do the practical. So please do things professionally and do things correctly. Okay, now for did you know? Quick question, some of you may have the slides, some of you have already looked at it. Who was the first programmer? Who's recognized as the first programmer? Okay, well, you guys are answering that. I'm going to answer the question here. Sir, do we have to do a design on paper or we can write it out in Word? You can do the design however you like. Word document, typed PDF, however you like, as long as it is submittable. Okay, you must be able to submit the design onto Eve. So if you're doing it handwritten, you use Cam Scanner and upload it. If you're doing it typed, as long as you're not doing screenshots and copying and pasting of code, your design will be accepted. Okay, I've seen some correct answers and some odd answers. Ladies and gentlemen, the first programmer, the mother of computing, is Lady Ada Lovelace. She developed the first program. She created an algorithm for a computer machine in the mid-1800s. Okay. However, her discovery to computer science was not discovered until 1950. She was the first programmer. She is the first programmer. Okay. So again, 1 point to the ladies in terms of IT. They are beating us flat in terms of their achievements in IT. So mother of computing is Lady Ada Lovelace. So it is quite profound that in the mid-1800s she developed the first algorithm, or first program actually. Okay, I'm going to start a debate online, which is not going to be worth it. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's get started because we are going to start running out of time if we don't move on. Recap of classes and objects. Okay, last week we introduced the aspect of a class and an object. Now again, a class is a blueprint and an object is an instantiation of a class. Okay, so keep in mind what I've got here. Where's my PowerPoint? I need my laser. Just to make it a bit easier so you know what the hell I'm referring to. Okay, excuse me. So we have our class here. Again, nothing in it. We're going to get to adding stuff. We're going to get to adding what needs to be added. And the keyword public indicates the accessibility. Again, a class is public. The reason for that is we need to be able to access the class. Okay? But the things inside the class are generally private, except certain things which we'll be discussing. Now, a vehicle can be instantiated. A vehicle can be accessed by anyone. The reason it's public is to be accessed. Instantiation, this is a term we use. We instantiate an object. We create an object. Okay, now this is what's being shown on the bottom here. I touched on it on Thursday's lecture, where I showed you how to create an object. An object is an instantiation of a class, a creation of a class. Now it's done through the keyword new, name of the class. Okay, this is the constructor, which we're going to discuss in depth today. So objects must be declared. So I declared a variable here of type vehicle, but it is at this point here, it is not an object. It is nothing. It is nothing right now. On this point, where I say my vehicle equals new vehicle, I create an object. I have a vehicle, it is called my vehicle. At that point, I have an object, and only at that point do I have an object. Okay, what this line is, and how we instantiate is known as a constructor, and I'll explain the constructor in details. So what about local variables can declare in a formal class? That'll depend on what you're trying to do. Okay. What about the question about what about local variables can we declare in form or class? Technically, local variables will refer to, remember, what is a local variable? Where do we use local variables? Do we like them in methods and subroutines and buttons? Correct. Okay. Declared here is a global variable, correct. Okay. So we have our global variable in our form, which is accessible within all the buttons. A local variable is something that's accessible and exists only within a button. Remember your scope. You did discuss scope last semester, correct? Scope of, okay, good. Scope of where things, or lifetime of variables. Okay. So what does the new do? Excellent question, which is important. The new is part of the constructor, which we're going to talk about now. Okay, so we're going to get there. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, keep some of your questions for practicals to after the recording or to the tutorial. Let's first cover what's here, and then I'll come back to some of your questions. No, the one question that actually is related to what we're doing, so can't we instantiate in form load? Not really, ladies and gentlemen, we don't use form load anymore. If I see people using a message box, input boxes in form load, I'm just going to deduct marks. Okay, form load is for things running before the program starts. Generally, you want to keep things into your buttons for now. I explain that as we go. So form load, next on the form loading for instantiation. Okay, because sometimes you're instantiating an array, which means you can't instantiate in form load. Okay, the grid status, that's form load. That I don't really care about. The debug status, that you guys can do in form load. That's not too much of a concern. I had a question about new, that which it sparked my attention. So let me just go back. What does new do? New is a keyword for a constructor. It's part of the keyword for the constructor. So you're going to see how it links up now. But it's normally new and the name of the class. Again, new, name of the class. This combined is invoking or calling or telling the constructor to work. Okay. So a constructor. Constructor is a special kind of method that is used to instantiate the object. Okay. Now I have we have some constructors and some images here just to help represent what's going on. So a constructor is a special public method that is used to create a object. It is, I'll show you how to create new now, don't worry. So a constructor is a method that it contains executable code that may define parameters. This method is used to run. The instance type is created. So what that basically boils down to saying is a constructor is used to build the object. So if we look at the set of images below, here we have our blueprint. Okay, I'll add the references to the images later on. Here we have the blueprint for a house. this is a blueprint. It's not the physical house. It's not the object. It goes through the constructor, or constructors in this case. We have two of them, the foreman and the workman maybe. And then we get our house. After the constructors finish their job, we get the object, which is the actual house. Is everyone okay with that concept? We have our class. Our constructor then builds the object. And yes, it's Bob the Builder. I had to use Bob the Builder for the constructor. Just made sense. Okay. So how it looks, our constructors. There are different types of constructors. Okay. There is a default constructor. And what I want to point out something now, this public sub new is something specific to VB. Normally the name of the constructor is the name of the class. So as mentioned before in tutorials and lectures, we're not trying to teach you VB, we're trying to teach you the principles of programming. So keep in mind that in general languages, they don't say new, they say the name of the class. And that's reflected in the UML on the side here. But within VB, we have the keyword new. So we go public sub new. This is done inside the class. I will show you an example in a few minutes. Yes, I have a hand raised. You have a minute to answer, and I'll move on. Someone raised their hand. You can ask the question. Just unmute yourself. Okay. I can't unmute. I'll type. Okay. Type. I'll get the question. Yeah. Okay. Good question. New is a reserved word inside VB, like private and public. Okay. Now, if we go back one slide, you'll see that it's new vehicle. So new links with the name of the class. Just keep that in mind. So we have different types of constructors. Normally I'd introduce a constructor and the different types later, but with how we're doing the lectures now, it just makes more sense to introduce you to all 4 types of constructors. Firstly, we have a constructor. Now, a constructor by itself is just the public sub new with a parameter. Okay, it is something with a parameter. Okay, I just want to read the one question because it does look like something actually a relevant question. So the class is basically the parent of each object with a house, and each object, different houses, apartments, double stories. You're on the right track to a degree. I'm not going to say no, but unlike a parent, the blueprint. If I take a blueprint and I build a house, will the blueprint match the house? Yes or no? Okay. So what you're referring to, parents and that terminology we're going to use later on, it should, good point, comes with inheritance. I don't want to use the different terminologies. So the blueprint, the class, defines what the object looks like and what the object can have or does have. Each object may be slightly different in terms of the information, yes, but the fundamentals should be the same. So if I take a blueprint for a house and I build several houses from the same blueprint, the outsides will look the same, they'll have the same walls, but the decorations and the furniture will be different. The people living inside of the houses will be different. That's different objects. But the house's structure, where things are, will be the same. What is inside it will be different. Like we had the example of the Lego figurine. We had the example of the Lego, and then we had the example of the different colored Lego figurines. Okay, something along those lines. Okay, so I'm gonna explain the 3 or actually 4 constructors, and then I'll show you code. So we have a constructor. A constructor by default normally has a parameter, and I'm working with a constructor of type vehicle. So in this constructor, it accepts tires as a parameter, and we set the value of tires. So this is a normal constructor. A normal constructor has parameters. So it has bits of information, okay? So it has pieces so it knows what the object's going to look like. Then we have our parameterless constructor, which has no parameters while it's parameterless, and we set default values. We can set it to 4, 5, whatever we want. It's fixed values. Then we have something called a copy constructor. This allows us to copy one object to another object. Okay, we'll explain this in more detail during tutorials and etc. I'm just introducing the idea. Then we have the default constructor, and this is not a typo. It is actually left blank on purpose. A default constructor doesn't really exist, and it's not visible by default. I'm going to show you what I mean by that now. Okay, so no, underscore tires is an instance variable. I'll explain that again now. Okay, so I'll open up a VB project. I'm going to go and create this vehicle class. So add vehicle .vb. Okay, one thing I'm going to state now, and it's going to stand, and I'll make I'll put a notice up on this. Never use input boxes, text boxes, or message boxes inside your class, ever. Okay? This is a standard rule. I'm just doing it now while I'm thinking about it. Okay, so option strict. I'll stick to the basics. These are always put on. And this is always off. Okay, right now, do you see a constructor in the code? Is there a public sub new anywhere in the code? Okay. The answer is yes, there is. There is the default constructor. Okay, we'll get to displaying in that later. There is a constructor. We don't see it because it's a default constructor. So I'm going to throw a button on just so we can do it. And I'm going to okay. So here we create our variable, my vehicle, as vehicle. Again, I don't have an object. Okay, I don't have an object. Right now, there's no object. Only once I do this and say new vehicle and run the code and click the button and execute this line of code do I have an object. This is the instantiation of the object. Okay, but is this giving me an error? Is any error is any underlining here with this new vehicle? But where is it here? It's not declared here in the class. Okay, this is the default constructor. VB automatically adds it for us until we do this. Okay, I'm just going to put tires here. Public sub new, and it accepts tires as integer. Tires equals Oh, yeah. Not TriCast. My spelling might be wrong. I don't know. Okay. We're going to get there. Don't worry. Now we have a constructor. Now we're going to go back to the form. Now it's complaining. Why? Why is it complaining? Parameters, correct. The second we make a constructor, the second we go and make a constructor, the default constructor disappears. So we can go and
Okay, it seems like we just lost Mr. Cottrell there for a moment. He should be back in a second, I hope. Open up Visual Studios and see where we are.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're
Sorry about
back
that.
on Discord.
Okay. What the hell's going on with Blackboard? Blackboard just disconnected me. Right now, what I've done, thanks for the response. What I've done is I've got two constructors. Now it's happy. The code is happy. What this is known as doing is constructor overloading. Okay, and we'll explain constructor overloading when we do method overloading as well. But what this allows us to do is have more than one constructor as long as the parameters are different. So as long as we have different parameters, we can have multiple constructors. So we can have more than one constructor. And this is what leads us to this part of the code. Okay, we have our constructor, our parameterless constructor. We can even have an object. We don't often do a copy constructor. This is just something that we do mention. The default constructor. And then this is known as constructor overloading. How this is represented in UML is this. So we would say vehicle and the values, vehicle bracket for the parameterless, and vehicles and the parameters for the copy constructor. So every time I'm showing something new, I'm also going to reflect the UML to link. Okay, let me just see the question. If tires constructor did not have parameter, it would still complain. Correct. So the only reason it's not complaining is because here I'm invoking the second constructor, the one without the parameters. Okay, which constructor is more applicable? Mortar refers to depending on the problem and need, correct, but also depending on what information you know. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I have no idea what's happening, but Blackboard doesn't like me today. Okay. Where was I? Depends on what information you know. So what information you know would depend on which constructor you invoke. So if you have more information about the person, like if we know how many tires there are, we can invoke the constructor with tires. Because I'm creating a vehicle. Did I specify that this vehicle is a car, a bike, a motorbike, a quad, a tricycle, what vehicle is it? So if we know that the vehicle only has 3 tires, then we use this constructor. But if we don't know, we could technically use this constructor and then change the number of tires later. Okay, it is something that we can do. I got a question about, can you repeat line 2 to 14 in the class or in the form? Class. Okay, so this is the one constructor. This is our constructor that accepts a parameter. This is our second constructor, which is our parameterless constructor. So if it doesn't accept a parameter, it sets the values of tires to 4. So if we don't know how many tires there are, we can invoke this constructor and assume the tires are 4. If that kind of makes sense. Okay. You always need a constructor. A constructor has to be there. That's why if we don't have constructors, okay, VB automatically creates a default constructor for us because we need a constructor. Okay, let's go back to the images. Let's go back to the slideshow to illustrate the process. Someone will design the class, okay? They will also design how it is built. So they'll define how the constructor works. So we don't have to worry about it. Because, ladies and gentlemen, out of everyone here, who knows how to build a house? Okay, shut up. Okay, except us on it. Yeah, okay, you actually know how to build a house. I'm impressed. I'll be impressed if you can plaster. Okay. It is hard to do. Plastering is actually hard to do. I have been in construction. It is difficult. It is not something I would want to do every day. So our class defines how the constructor will work. Our class defines how and what things we need to get our object to work. So we always need a constructor, be it the parameterless constructor, or if it is a constructor with parameters, we need a constructor. It is something we have to have. Okay. So a constructor has to be there. We can allow the user to specify the number of tires. That's why we have the other constructor. I'm just using it as an example. When I was setting up the slides, I was just using tires as an example because every vehicle technically has tires. It's something that every vehicle should have. Okay, we've got a few more minutes of the lecture. I'm going to introduce property methods. Okay, ignoring Mr. van der Westhuizen's comment about a hover car. Any current vehicle that is on the roads or in the air, even a plane has tires. So I'm going with that. Okay, property. Trains have tires. What do you think connects to the rails? Okay, hold on. I was going to see the question from default constructor, one-story house, and yeah, n-story house. Okay, so the comment of a default constructor equals one-story house and a parameter. Remember, a parameter constructor is a constructor equals n-story houses. That's the right idea. So you can adjust your setup. Okay, good question, Moses. What happens if we have a default constructor and a parameterless constructor? Which will it pull from? The trick is the second you make a constructor. So the second we do this, the second we go and say public sub new, it deletes the default constructor. It automatically destroys a default constructor because there's a parameterless constructor. So do we have to use a constructor on all variables in the class? You can have all the variables going into the constructor. So if we also say we have this, you can have all the values going in there. And actually create the respective information. Okay. How about if we have two arrays which user has to specify? We'll get to that. So if we put boxes, how do we take the information from the user? Ladies and gentlemen, you are forgetting the basics. Your input boxes, your strings, your text boxes all go in your form. Okay, so your input boxes, the information will come from your form and get passed. I don't want to see input boxes in your class. I don't want to see text boxes in your class. Those come from your form. Your form handles input and output. Your class handles the data and the manipulation of the data, the handling of data. Ladies and gentlemen, the difference between having the different constructors is to handle different situations. Sometimes you won't have the name, but you need to create the object. So you have the different constructors to handle different things. Okay. 4 variables. The 4 is just for the tires. I don't want to declare another variable. Okay. We are starting to run out of time for today's lecture. So I just want to introduce the idea of a property method, and then we can end today's lecture, and then we will carry on tomorrow with the tutorials, and we will then carry on with the additional work as well. How to do the calculations in classes, this will also be discussed in tomorrow's tutorial. We aren't planning on leaving you something else. Ladies and gentlemen, one thing you would have noticed, the TUTs are in the TUT. We'll be doing a past practical for the TUT. To answer the question, sir, what will we be doing in the TUT? We'll be doing a past practical in the TUT to get you guys up to speed. One thing I want to point out, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of you were asking this question. I'll explain it now. In the form, can we access name and tires directly? No. Okay. To do that, we need a property method. So we would have a public property method, name as string. Now, this is important to keep in mind. I can't have name here and name. They have to be two different things. So we have underscore name for the variable. Our property is name, and it gets a access to work with name and set the value of name. So in the form, we would say that my vehicle, so if I have a text box, txt name dot text equals convert to string, my vehicle dot name, and then display. We can then input through the getters and setters. Okay, that's today's lecture. done. I just wanted to show you a property method before we finished off. One thing, ladies and gentlemen, especially for those watching the videos after the lecture and not live, the recordings, you're welcome to put comments on the YouTube channel, PG comments, if you're for questions, or you can put comments in the Discord server. We'll open up a channel for lecture questions. So if you are watching this and you're unsure of something, you can post a question and then we'll get back to it in the next lecture. Okay, because I know a lot of there's no YouTube channel, it's a unlisted channel. So if you go into Eve, there's a list of all the lectures on YouTube. But again, the comments are PG, ladies and gentlemen, please, professional. If you have questions when you're watching it and you are unsure, especially the students that are watching this after the live lecture, you can put questions in Discord or you can put questions in the YouTube. We will make a channel on Discord just for lecture questions. So if you're unsure of something I've explained in the lecture, you can post a question there and then I can answer in the next lecture, hopefully. That is it for today's lecture. I see, can you please post the code on Eve? There's no real code to post on Eve, ladies and gentlemen. I'll post the code once we finish the section. I'll post the code, yes. Okay. I'm going to stop the recording. Have a good day. If you have any questions, you can still stay on and ask.